Yes, folks, by now most of you will know that I believe that the China virus escaped a lab in Wuhan by accident, or at least probably by accident, and that the Chinese Communist Party deliberately spread the virus around the world to paralyse the West. And the Jones and Credlin video I'm going to show today essentially endorses my belief. Now, as you watch the video, take particular note of what Peter Jennings, the director of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, says. It really is a wake-up call. And now I also believe the CCP deliberately spread the virus as a dummy run for future biological warfare, to see how easily they can cripple the world economy and thus gain a strategic advantage. But first, the other day I posted a video about our dear leader using the China virus as a way to gain total state control. And the very next day she said this.
Prime Minister, Minister Cipollone spoke of unemployment yesterday. She confirmed that unemployment will be likely to go up post-COVID, which isn't a surprise, but there is concern within some Māori communities that life after COVID will just continue to extend the gap between the rich and the poor. What can you do to, or what will you be doing to make sure that doesn't happen?
You will have heard me say from this podium before that this has to be an opportunity for us to finally close the inequities that we have in New Zealand, and that we've...
Yes, in other words, this pandemic is an opportunity to totally restructure our economy.
Had for a persistent amount of time. Now, whether or not it's the guidance that you see from the State Services Commission saying today to exercise wage restraint for those on higher incomes, but to consider the wage situation of those on lower incomes.
Yes, socialist redistribution of wealth.
Or whether it's the work that we're proactively doing to redeploy, to drive a high wage economy, to see that we don't replace those industries that traditionally have had lower wages with more lower wages. This is an opportunity and we need to use it.
So your expectation is then, Prime Minister, that we look forward 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, that gap will be less as opposed to going wider?
Our goal as a government has always been to reduce inequalities. That is now a focus now more than ever.
Wow. While the economy is crippled, we take over. Total state control. Anyway, now to Jones and Credlin.
The focus now is turning towards China. In fact, speaking on New York Talkback Radio in the last 24 hours, the former New York Mayor, Rudy Giuliani, lashed out at China's policy of letting travellers from Wuhan, ground zero for the coronavirus pandemic, travel around the world as the disease took hold. Speaking on Talkback Radio, Mr. Giuliani said, quote, they sent over 1 million people around the world, 1.5 million.
Yes, 1.5 million China virus mules.
Almost like ambassadors carrying the disease. He said, what's wrong with them? They've got no conscience. It's really a tragedy. This is directly caused by the Chinese Communist government and by the choices they made. Almost all of this would have been avoided, he said. The whole world is kind of shut down because of them. Well, a further theory is emerging, and that is a piece that I read, and many people talk about conspiracies. I'm not into conspiracies, but this is an American social scientist, Stephen Mosher. Now, admittedly, he's had a bit of a cloudy academic past, but only because he's done extensive research work into China. He is the founding member of an outfit that's called a Committee on the Present Danger, China. He wrote a piece on February 22, referring to an emergency meeting held by Chairman Xi, in which he reportedly said, amongst other things, that lab safety is, quote, a national security issue. Now, Xi didn't bit that the coronavirus, quote, now devastating large swathes of China, that's February 22, he didn't admit it had escaped from one of the country's bio-research labs, and indeed, many people dispute this conclusion, but he did say, quote, the very next day evidence emerged suggesting this is exactly what happened as the Chinese Ministry of Science and Technology released a new directive titled Instructions on Strengthening Biosecurity Management in Microbiology Labs that Handle Advanced Viruses like the novel coronavirus. Now, there's only one microbiology lab in China and that handles advanced viruses, and that's in Wuhan, which was the epicenter of the epidemic. Now, the author's not suggesting these people have made the virus and let it loose. On the contrary, he argues that a senior researcher, and he names her, Major General Chen, was dispatched to Wuhan, suggesting that the coronavirus may have escaped from the National Biosafety Laboratory, which is part of the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Yes, and now as we speak, the Australian government has been threatened by the CCP with export boycotts for simply wanting an inquiry into this mess.
And she was sent to put the genie back in the bottle. He argues that China first blamed a seafood market, not far from the Institute of Virology, even though the first documented cases of coronavirus involved people who'd never set foot there. He said they pointed to snakes, bats, and even a cute, scaly little anteater called a pangolin as the source of the virus. It turns out that snakes don't carry coronaviruses and that bats aren't sold at the seafood market. The evidence points, he said, to research being carried out at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The virus may have been carried out of the lab by an infected worker or crossed over into human beings when they unknowingly dined on a lab animal. My point is simple. The focus is now very much on China. And Peter Jennings, the Executive Director of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute and a former Deputy Secretary for Strategy in the Defence Department, makes this very point. He wrote recently, while this pandemic rages, we need to be watching Beijing's actions closely. The global economy may be in hibernation, but geopolitics is thriving and sprinting towards a potential crisis towards the end of this year and early next year. Peter Jennings joins us from Canberra. Peter, do you have the view on this argument that China was manufacturing a virus, but that in research being carried out, the virus might have been carried out of the lab by an infected worker?
It's possible, Alan. As you say, in Wuhan, China has its most highly technologically complex biological research institute. It's very clear to me that this was not part of a biological warfare program because, frankly, it's not the type of agents that would be being developed. But I think it is possible that the virus escaped from this research facility and then ran uncontrolled for a period of time. And really the only way we're going to find that out is if an investigation of the type that our government has called for happens. Yeah. And you can be absolutely guaranteed our government won't do that.
Yeah, did you hear that, folks? He said you can be absolutely guaranteed that our government won't do that. So in other words, ScoMo is all BS.
Nonetheless, you're saying while we're fighting the virus, this is the real issue, we'd better start thinking about defence and national security risks. Now, what are they?
Well, I think this is vitally important because what has happened here is that China is making an attempt to come out of the virus strategically ahead of the United States and any other country of the region, and it's absolutely racing to do that, including with some very aggressive military manoeuvrings at sea around Taiwan and in the South China Sea, large-scale purchasing of oil because it's so cheap, which you need for military operations. I believe China is trying to position itself to be the military dominant power in the Asia-Pacific region in just a few months' time.
Well, there's the wake-up call, folks. So effectively, we are now on the brink of war.
And it's going to stare down all opposition to see if it can get to that point.
Peter?
Peter Jennings, I've got to ask, Maurice Payne called for a full and very transparent investigation into the origins of COVID-19. The Prime Minister backed her in pretty hard today. Of course, the Chinese ministry spokesman saying that they won't be cooperating, they don't support a very transparent and indeed independent inquiry. How can we get to the bottom of it all if China won't cooperate?
I think, Peter, it's actually something that should be done inside the G20, which China is not a member of. I think we should get those G20 countries that want to participate in a high-level investigation to mount the investigation themselves, pooling the considerable intelligence resources that some of those major democracies and Australia has. I think if there was a shared effort like that, it would keep a global spotlight on Chinese bad behaviour, right, which would be very useful. And it would actually bring to light a lot of things, help us sort through the rumours and the myths, I mean,
Absolutely.
there's a reason why China doesn't want to see it, and that's because they know the outcome of that investigation would be very bad for it indeed.
Peter, you've argued that the Chinese Communist Party is determined to emerge from the COVID-19 in a stronger strategic position in the Asia-Pacific relative to the United States and its allies. Now, surely any stronger strategic position will derive from the conspicuous economic weakness now of the West.
Exactly.
Well, yes, and the fact that I think China has probably had several months to prepare its elite military units to lock them down so that they can deploy to sea without the virus. There are claims from the West now that at least 2 American aircraft carriers have got crews afflicted with the virus. The Chinese are saying 4 American aircraft carriers, which would mean no US aircraft carrier presence in the Pacific. This is a very dangerous time. Now, I don't want to suggest that China is about to run over the American military. That is not going to happen. The Americans are vastly more powerful. But we've got a game of chicken here, with China seeking to intimidate as many countries in the region as it can, to back down, to side with China, to walk away from the United States. And we need to have, I think, a strong show of democratic military force in our part of the world to tell China this is not worth the game.
But that's very hard to do now, given that most of our leaders are globalists.
You will not be able to intimidate us into allowing you to occupy Taiwan or to do more military mischief in the South China Sea. That would be simply unacceptable. And that means we've got to get focused on this issue right now, Alan and Peter. It's not something that can wait until a white paper next year. It's something we have to be looking at right now.
Peter?
Peter Jennings, I've got to ask you, I'm interested in when you look at the way in which the disease or the virus moved around China, it seemed to be so well contained. It's not well contained in the rest of the world. It's been something that's gone like wildfire. Look at the case of the Ruby Princess right across Australia in a matter of days. How did it stay inside Hubei and not end up in Beijing, where the political masters are, or in Shanghai, which is the big commercial centre? How believable is it that dissidents and other activists, we know about the doctors, they all weren't somehow disappeared under the cover of coronavirus? I mean, will we ever really know the extent of the numbers involved?
I think China has been vastly understating the numbers of people that have died from the virus by a significant factor,
Of course they have.
Including in Wuhan. What China was able to do was to lock the city down with a degree of force that we are not even contemplating in the most extreme measures that might happen in a Western democracy. It has been able to block any access into Beijing in a way which is protecting the elite political leadership of the Communist Party. And it had, from December through to about the early part of February, the middle part of February, a period where it was able to do these things. At the same time, it was telling the West that this was a controllable disease and not really a problem. So it stole a 6-week advantage. And then the party has control of all media and all reporting. So there is no ability to actually see what else is going on other than what the party wants you to know. Whereas it's all open for, sort of gory dissection inside America and every place else.
Peter, on that point that Peter raised, I mean, it is fanciful, surely, to imagine that the 2 most populous cities, Shanghai and Beijing, completely escaped the coronavirus. And if you look at the figures that are coming out of China, that's what you're led to believe. And on that basis, could I just ask you, Taiwan, of course, has been very, very successful at handling the virus in the strategies that are employed. Now, this is an intense propaganda effort now by China, isn't it, to isolate Taiwan and assert political primacy in the region. So how does that affect us?
Oh, and can I just jump in there too? In Hong Kong too, we're hearing that a lot of the protesters have been locked up. Why? Everyone's focus is elsewhere. That's what's happening in Hong Kong.
Absolutely, yes. There's been a crackdown on dissidents and human rights activists all around the country. Taiwan has probably handled the virus the best of all countries around the world. The way I think about Taiwan is that, here we have a liberal democracy of about 25 million people with an independent legal system and a free press. sounds a little bit like Australia, doesn't it? I don't think we can allow China to dictate to us or to the world how we should engage with such a successful democracy as Taiwan. I think it's in all of our interests to say that we would be there to support the defence of Taiwan, because if countries in the world will walk away from Taiwan, why wouldn't they walk away from us?
Exactly.
You know, the democracies need to look after each other. So I think there's a strong interest in siding with Taiwan and not letting them be bullied by China, and in not letting them isolate Taiwan further, which is exactly what Beijing is trying to do right now.
So what we're seeing now, am I right in saying, is this very intense Communist Party push to win the narrative battle? So how does China escape the simple international judgment that they hid the seriousness of the crisis while Chinese companies stripped Western companies of medical equipment?
Ultimately, I don't think they will be able to escape that judgment, Alan. And I think if we look at Australia, I think the Australian people have got a very clear sense of that, and in some ways are significantly ahead of their government in terms of thinking about how we should deal with this issue. Our own government is now coming out of this hypnotic stance of not wanting to say or do anything that will be offensive in Beijing, because I think that Canberra realises that's just no longer plausible anymore, that the Australian population won't buy it.
Yeah, but that depends on jobs, doesn't it?
So, in fact, notwithstanding China's propaganda efforts, notwithstanding their military posturing, I think Beijing is going to come out of the coronavirus experience in a much worse position internationally, and they're just not going to be able to spin their way out of that.
Well, let's hope so.
Good on you. Could you, Peter, a quick one before we go?
How do you see all of this playing out with the decision in the United Kingdom on Huawei, for example? I know Josh Frydenberg has, the Treasurer, a 6-month moratorium on FIRB decisions. Some people think he's remade them. No, he hasn't. He's just dropped the limits for disclosures and approvals down to 0, but that's only for 6 months. Is it going to change our relationship with the commercial arm of the Communist Party as much as it will the military arm, which is the way in which they buy into Western countries?
In Australia, Peter, I think we've got to fundamentally unpick a lot of very bad decisions that have been taken perhaps in a kinder era that let Chinese or Hong Kong companies buy most of the East Coast electricity network, a large part of our gas network, the Port of Darwin, other ports around the country. There has been simply too much investment. And what's become clear now, if it wasn't clear then, is that when you are dealing with these companies, you are in effect dealing with the Communist Party of China. Now, I think our government understands that point. I think it's a very uncomfortable point and a very uncomfortable issue for them to have to deal with. But what the coronavirus does is that it gives us an opportunity to start separating and reducing our dependence from the Communist Party of China. We have to take this opportunity. I think it's the last best chance we've got.
That's for real. Now, folks, today I'm going to finish on a different topic. If you haven't seen Michael Moore's latest movie, The Planet of the Humans, yet, you must watch it, because the far left loon throws other far left loons under the bus. The movie completely destroys the Greens' renewable energy hoax. Now, I've posted a link to it in the description below, along with James Shaw's email address and Adam Bandt's email address. Now, watch the movie, then email those scumbags and give them heaps for lying to everyone, especially our children.